You know, it seems to me that there's a fair amount of rot in America's legal system right now. And it's not the kind of rot you've been hearing about from the rioters in the streets. They say we should get rid of police. They say we should shut down the prisons, release all the criminals, and I guess go to full-on anarchy. I'm not a fan of that. I don't imagine that Cully Stimson is either, senior legal fellow at Heritage and manager of the National Security Law Program. Cully, I brought you on to talk about the riots that have been going on in American cities and the appropriateness of the response from the federal government, and also whether or not the state and city governments can be trusted when they say, well, we will clean up the problem, just take those federal officers out of our cities. But welcome to the program. If you want to say something about Joker Tsarnaev's sentence or this new appeals court ruling, you can. If not, we can move right on to the riots.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lars. It's always a privilege to be on your show. I haven't read the opinion yet. Look, the appeals courts across the country exist for a reason. I'll withhold judgment about whether the decision had merit or whether it was based on a policy preference. But since he'll stay in jail pending the new trial, and I'm sure there will be a new trial, that's the way the system works. That's what the rule of law stands for. But, I have one statute I can point to your readers that I think they should read.
All right.
And frankly, the mayor of all these cities who are really allowing this crime spree to happen, it's 18 U.S.C. 2101. It's the federal crime of rioting. And when you read it, it's very short. It basically says if you're crossing state lines or using means of communication that crosses state lines and rioting, which everyone knows what a riot is, you're guilty of the federal crime of rioting. That's what's happening. Now, some of these people may not have crossed state lines. They may be locals. And the property destruction and fires and assaults and all the rest of it that we've talked about before are state law crimes. And so they have a job to do their job, and they're just not doing their job. And so the feds have a limited but a really important role in enforcing federal law.
Let me ask you something, though. I don't want to get hyper-legal, but I'm kind of fascinated by the differences. When the statute says, or if you use means of communications that cross state lines, well, Cully, I don't know that much about the Internet. I use it every day, but I'm well aware that I've been told by the Internet folks who do know their stuff, if I send an email to one of my producers who may only be 10 or 20 miles away, I'm well aware that that message may have looped through some other part of America on its way to its final destination, may have even looped through a federal or outside the United States to another country. So would that mean that if any of these protesters are communicating by means of Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, text messaging, or anything else, that almost automatically makes any rioter that's using electronic communications or social media is automatically under federal purview. Am I wrong?
You're not necessarily right or wrong. Because it depends.
That's a lawyer answer.
Yeah, it's Weasley language, but it's true.
more billable hours, Cully.
If you're telling somebody, hey, get me a soda, one rioter to another, that's not a crime. If you're saying, hey, bring the rockets over here, or let's cross the river here from one state to another. So what's that nice river right there near you guys in Portland?
The Columbia, the proud Columbia River.
Where all the windsurfers are. If you cross the Columbia over here, so we can go burn these buildings or attack these federal officers. And that email went from one guy who's standing 30 feet from another, and that email bounced around across the state or out of the country and got to the other person. Boom, you trigger federal law. So it depends what the content is too, right? I mean, if it's get me a soda, no problem.
I get it.
If it's let's bomb.
Yeah, I mean, bring the bottled water over here. We're all thirsty after having committed so many assaults. Let me ask you about one other thing about this, because you mentioned everybody knows the definition of riot. I actually looked up the state statute. I don't know how well it matches the federal, but the state statute says anytime 5 or more people gather in one place and engage in tumultuous conduct, I know, a little archaic terminology, that causes alarm. In other words, it doesn't have to actually break windows. It doesn't have to involve assault. It's when a bunch of people get in some kind of fight or tumultuous engagement that causes people around them say, holy cow, what's going on there? That is the definition of riot, because some people may think riot is only when, police officers in riot gear mix it up with protesters throwing bricks at them. But it's a lot less than that, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I'm not an Oregon lawyer. I haven't looked at the statute, and I haven't checked out whether that has been challenged as overly broad as a constitutional.
How about the federal statute, though? What's the federal statute?
Well, the federal statute is clearer. It is clearer than your state statute. Tumultuous. That's a tough word, and so I suspect there have been challenges to that in state court. I suspect there is case law in Oregon that defines what it does and does not mean and include, but I don't know.
Okay.
But look, when you punch somebody in the face, when you burn a car, when you throw fecal material at a federal officer, when you torch a building, those are state law, common law crimes, no doubt a crime under Oregon law, and they should be prosecuted.
Except when the locals don't do it. The question mark that has been raised by the protesters, not by me, is, well, the president has no authority to send people in to stop this kind of activity, especially when it involves federal buildings. He does have that authority, does he not?
Of course he does. Look, the president does not have the authority to send federal troops into a city and say, okay, since the local cops have their hands tied behind their back because of feckless politicians telling them not to do anything, they are the local police. He doesn't have the authority to do that. But there is a code, Title 18 of U.S. Code, that has thousands of federal criminal laws in it, which are happening in every state in the United States right now. And there's the federal crime of riot, 18 U.S.C. 2101. And so the federal government can obviously enforce federal law, not just limited to protecting a federal building or a federal courthouse. That's silly. That's not the limit of federal law.
Well, I'm just glad to see that the federal government has decided to step in where the state government would not. And to the liberals out there who say he can't do that, I say to them, really, did you also disapprove of sending federal officials in to enforce the school laws in Arkansas, or to stand up for the civil rights of students back in Little Rock, Arkansas a few decades ago? Cully Stimson is the senior legal fellow for Heritage.